We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
Welcome to a special edition of Granite State Live. Great to have you along. I'm your host, Keith Hansen. Tonight, we're digging a little deeper into a topic that we first discussed several weeks ago, and that is the topic of adequate funding of public education here in the Granite State. If you have any questions regarding tonight's broadcast, we're going to get into a lot of information. It's maybe like drinking from a fire hose. So if you have any questions or if you want additional information about anything that we're talking about tonight, the Government Integrity Project, the New Hampshire Committee of Safety, or SaveOurSchoolsNH.org, and how to get involved in that initiative, please send an email request to us at granitestatelive@gmail.com. That's granitestatelive@gmail.com. And the production team will make sure that your email gets the attention that it deserves and that any requests are completely fulfilled. Joining us tonight is Tom Murray, co-founder of the Government Integrity Project, co-founder of the Windham Academy Charter School, and former Windham School Board vice chairman. Also joining us in studio is Ken Eyring, co-founder of the Government Integrity Project, co-founder of the Windham Academy Charter School, and former Windham School Board chairman. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess we should really kind of tee it up this way. Tom, you sent me this past week approximately 7-minute speech that was made on the floor of the New Hampshire Senate regarding Senate Bill 582, which seeks to modify the base cost of an adequate education. I love that term, and we're going to dissect that term. The base cost of an adequate education. I think what we should do is give this piece of proposed legislation the title that it deserves. Let's call it the Let's Spend $500 million That We Don't Have Act. This speech was given by Keith Murphy. Before we even dissect this, I want to play this in its entirety, and then we'll chop this up as we go, because every minute, every second of this approximately 7-minute speech, I got to be honest with you, I listened to it, and I was thinking, this first of all, is gubernatorial.
I agree.
Number one. And number two, this is something that I would expect to see in a movie script, not something that I would expect to see coming out of or out from underneath the Gold Dome in Concord. But yet, we have it here in New Hampshire. Finally, an elected representative that gets it. I'd like to play that speech right now.
Is it inexpedient to legislate? Is there any further discussion? I recognize Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I could give you many good reasons to oppose this bill. I could tell you that the Department of Education testified the bill would cost $538 million a year to start, plus increases every other year for adjustment. But the bill is completely silent on where that money comes from. It falls from the sky. Is it an income tax? Is it a sales tax? Is it a bigger property tax? Is there money trees that have sprouted on the State House lawn? This is $500 million that we do not have. It might as well be $500 billion. I have learned that there are unfortunately times when legislators file bills that are designed to fail, but they're filed anyway for the purpose of scoring political points with special interest groups. And the lack of any funding mechanism in this bill proves it is not serious legislation. I could tell you, Madam President, that we could meet the court order in Conval to the letter, but the result would be that some of the poorest towns in our state would actually get far less aid. I could argue that increased state funding of local schools would mean less local control. The state can't be on the hook for decisions made at the local level, and school boards should be careful what they wish for, because those that fund the schools will run the schools. I could point out the legislature has sent more money to schools every single year, even though enrollment is down 18% in the last 20 years. In fact, the state is spending more money now than ever to educate fewer students than schools have had in 3 generations. I could tell you that while the state is spending more money to educate fewer kids, the administration cost has grown to the point that New Hampshire now spends more money per pupil in admin cost than 48 other states. We spend $2,000 per student per year to push the paper. And all of those are perfectly valid and accurate reasons to oppose the bill. But the best reason to vote against this bill is the one you just heard for why we have to pass it. The argument we are legally obligated to pass it, that the Constitution requires it and we have no choice. None of that is true. And the pervasive belief that we have no choice but to follow the demands of the court isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. We each swore an oath to abide by and uphold the Constitution of this state, the same oath sworn by our state's judges. Our oath is no less serious and no less valid than theirs. We each have the right and obligation to examine our conscience, reconcile it with this document, and vote accordingly. This obligation is just as sacred as those undertaken by those who sit on the bench. And I have read the various opinions of the judiciary. I have examined my conscience, and I have found, in my opinion, those documents are grossly incorrect, lacking in fact and reason. They ignore the plain meaning of the text in this document, and they are void of any understanding of history. Cherish does not mean fund. It has never meant fund. It's a ridiculous argument that only a lawyer would think to make and only other lawyers would choose to believe. It was not written for attorneys. This was written for craftsmen and farmers. It is a straightforward document written in plain English. It says what it means, and it means what it says. Only a collective exercise in wishful thinking could anyone pretend that Article 83 requires the state to fund education. Madam President, if cherish meant fund in 1784, when the article was adopted, why didn't the state begin sending schools checks the next year? 1785, 1786, 1787. After all, the people who voted to adopt that language, they lived in towns, they had schools. Why weren't they screaming for their annual education state funding? Why did it take 2 centuries for anyone to make that argument? Are we really to believe that for 200 years there was this massive constitutional oversight and just now we've realized it and it's our job to fix it? That's absurd. Even more absurd, the actual language of Article 83 is that we are to cherish the interest of literature and the sciences in seminaries and public schools. If that obligates us to fully fund public schools, it obligates us to fund seminaries. When should we tell the Fairwood Bible Institute to expect their check? Why aren't we funding a league of authors and geologists, since we are equally obligated to cherish literature and the sciences? Again, the whole argument is ridiculous. It is a waste of this body's time to even ponder it. Article 83 was copied from the Massachusetts Constitution, written by John Adams, specifically placed not in the section of the Constitution that recognizes the rights of citizens, but rather in the section that describes the form of government. The purpose of the clause is to protect a participatory democracy as John Adams intended. Nothing in it obligates the state to pay anything. The plain truth is that the members of the High Court forgot their place in Claremont and in every related decision since. They legislated from the bench. They did our job, falling into the trap that has snared well-meaning judges from the beginning of the Republic. But it is we who are the elected representatives of the people. It is our role to decide the law. It is their role to enforce it. If judges wish to influence education funding and policy, they just have to step down from the bench, put their name on a ballot, and win the right to sit in these chairs. The courts are demanding that we increase spending by $500 million. But in order to spend more is in order to tax more. And Article 5 specifically reserves all decisions related to taxation to the legislature. No court can order us to raise taxes. We, the legislature, do not dance to their tune, and it is dangerous to this institution for any of us to believe that we should. Our votes are our own. The courts are attacking our very right to vote as our conscience demands. Madam President, I urge the members of this body to uphold their oaths to this document, protect the independence of the legislature, and respond to the meanderings with vehement indignation rather than acquiescent supplication. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Finally, somebody in Concord gets it. Gotta be honest here.
Very refreshing.
Incredibly
Absolutely.
refreshing. Joining us in studio, Keith Murphy, New Hampshire State Senator, representing New Hampshire's Senate District 16. That encompasses North Manchester, Goffstown, Hooksett, Raymond, and Candia, and also the proprietor of Murphy's Tap Room in Bedford. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
And let me just be the first to say, awesome job.
Yeah, thank you for that speech.
Inspiring.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
It's about time somebody stepped up and actually read the Constitution and defends it in the State House.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel as though sometimes legislators, they all swear the same oath on the Constitution, but how many of them actually read it and understand it? And it's become sort of a rote thing they just do because they've always done it.
Right.
So
It's amazing how there's a term especially in educational sciences, the Einstellung effect. This is how we've always done it. It's not broken. We don't have to fix it. Why should we change anything? It becomes custom and usage to engage in this type of behavior. And it really surprises me, to be honest, how many of these people, how many elected representatives don't understand, first of all, language. That's a big thing. And I think that's really what this is ultimately boiling down to. The term cherish, for instance, has become the focal point of this. I gave a presentation earlier this summer to the Liberty Caucus for the New Hampshire House. Out of 30 people in that room, only one person could tell me the difference between a legal definition, a legal dictionary, and a colloquial definition or Merriam-Webster's dictionary. It's amazing, I think, how illiterate, not in the literal sense, but in the figurative sense, so many lawmakers are. They don't understand what it is that they're doing. They just go through the process. Am I wrong on this? I mean, you see this and you deal with this on a daily basis.
I've been there 6 terms, and we have classes on ethics. We have classes on sexual harassment. There's never a class on the Constitution and what it means, and I think that's a shame.
And that needs to be remedied because there are a lot of legislators that I don't think understand it, Keith.
Yeah, well, and, the educational system these days really isn't meant to produce people that know the Constitution inside and out.
Yeah, being a former school board member, Ken, I think you and I can both agree to that. That's hence why a lot of reasons why we were driven to create the Wyndham Academy Charter School, just to have some alternative education points of view.
Yep.
Well, let me ask you this. With that facility, what is the average cost to educate a student?
In the state or?
No, for the charter schools.
Oh, boy. What is it these days, Tom?
I don't know what
6,000,
the-
7,000?
Yeah, it's probably around there, maybe a little bit more with some of the state aid.
Now, this is going back a couple of...
Significantly lower to your point, though.
Yeah, well, even going back a couple of years, I'm looking at Mount Royal Academy. I'm looking at the former New England Classical Academy up in Claremont, Trinity Christian School in Concord. They do a phenomenal job of educating children for less than $10,000.
Academy for
Per year.
Science and Design is like the #1 school in the state, I believe. Charter school.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess here's the question: you've got one bill here that is looking to spend $538 million, okay, of money that, as Senator Murphy, I think, very eloquently put it, is there a money tree that's just going to shower cash?
I know where it is.
Yeah, I'd love to know where that is. Where is the state going to get this? And then there's another piece of legislation that would also encumber the state for an additional $500 million. So we're looking at an additional $1 billion in proposed spending. And where does this money come from? I can tell you where it's going to come from. If you listen to Andrew Valinsky, it will necessitate an income tax. It will necessitate a sales tax. It will necessitate increases on existing taxes that are going to tax people right out of the Granite State.
Yeah, people think they're taxed to death now. Just hold my beer.
Yeah. Honestly, if it was my goal to create an income tax in New Hampshire, and I thought I'm going to take 10 years of my life and I'm going to dedicate it to having an income tax, this is exactly the strategy that I would take to do it.
Yeah.
And it's always under the auspices of education.
It's for the children, right?
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're against this, you're against the kids.
That's right.
So, Senator, you had mentioned enrollment is down 18%, yet it's over $2,000 per student in administrative costs, or as you had said, to push the paper, more than 48 other states. What is a good median number that you would see in those other states?
Oh, we spend about double the national average. I mean, $1,000 per student per year would be a dramatic improvement and still put us right around the midway point.
So if you were to eliminate the administrative, now when you say administrative costs, are we incorporating in superintendent and assistant superintendent salaries?
Information technology specialists, HR specialists, assistant superintendents, business administrators for some reason are making $250,000 a year. So yeah, this is a whole layer of admin. A lot of it is intended to, ironically, produce more money. You know, grant writers and such to get federal and state grants. So that's really where a lot of the fat is, in my opinion.
So, of course, the opponents of, and I guess, you know, it works, it's a double-edged sword. When we talk about adequate education, the Democrats seem to equal the word adequacy with increased spending. And I think more fiscal conservative-minded people would say, well, okay, so let's get the spending, let's rein the spending in, let's trim the fat. School vouchers would be a fantastic idea. Having school choice would be a fantastic idea. Allowing there to be some degree of competition in this educational marketplace would be a great idea. Your well-performing schools would rise to the top. The schools that are performing in a substandard fashion, they would self-identify and they could be eliminated. You could actually have a merit-based program for this. What is adequate? Let's start with that.
Well, in the recent Conval decision, the judge in that case was Judge David Ruoff, and David Ruoff spent a lot of time breaking out exactly what it costs to educate a student in the basics. And he came up with this number, and it's around $7,000 a kid. That's the number that he came out with. And it didn't account for things like transportation or school lunches. It's just having a teacher in the class teaching these the basic components of an education that he believed was adequate. You know, I don't understand how a town like Bedford, it's a good town, great schools, one of the best in the state, they spend $18,000 per kid per year. Yet there are towns out there spending $35,000 to $40,000 a kid per year, getting much worse results. I don't know how they justify that. You know, Wyndham has great schools.
We do, but I'm very cautious when you look at the cost per pupil, because the cost per pupil, when I was a school board member, never took into consideration all the building aid, all the bond costs. It's a really deceiving.
It is.
Yeah, it's not accurate. I want to know how much money are you taking out of my wallet at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And when you look at that number, that's more along the lines of $25,000 per student here in Windham when you add it all up.
It's also important to look at the results. And when I ran for the school board back in 2014, at the time the current school board members and people who worked in the school district were very proud that we were the number 5 school district in the state. My position was, and it still is, that if, you know, half of the children who are going to school are below proficiency levels, being 5th when you're comparing against mediocrity, that doesn't really mean anything.
Right.
We're failing our children.
Well, that's like grading to the curve.
That's
You know,
right.
I mean, if the
That's
best
exactly
school, if the best grade in the class is an 80, we're going to set that as
That's
the
right.
100%. So we really are grading to the curve. I've had people ask me this: what is the standard by which these schools and the performance levels of these students are being judged?
The NAEPs. I mean, that's the typical standard. I think if you go onto that website, saveourschools.nh.org, you'll actually see where we're actually spending more money in math, reading, are going down. So it's actually the inverse, actually spending more money and you're getting worse results. And I think it goes from 2013 to 2025. And it's a really disturbing graph.
And this is why we created the organization, because people are outraged that they're being taxed out of their properties. A lot of people can't afford their taxes. And a vast majority of the property taxes go to funding schools, 75, 80% in many towns. And it's out of control. And so, Tom, Dan Richards did some research and found that the Constitution really, in our opinion, doesn't allow for taxation for education, which is what brought us here a few weeks ago with you, Keith.
Mm-hmm. And that generated a lot of comments. People are very interested in this, but there's also some concern as well too. So if let's say that we actually got a ruling from the Supreme Court on this, that there is no, it's correctly interpreted, and there is no funding requirement. 75%, sometimes in some instances 80% of your taxes would come back to you in the form of a rebate. Where would the schools get the money to perform, to run their schools, to educate the kids, to buy supplies, to cover any of the? Is this all federal money? Is there any state contribution whatsoever beyond what we're already looking at right now? Which I think adequacy is. What's the adequacy rate right now? It's like 4,000, 5,000,
pushing 5,000.
5,000. Okay, so roughly. The argument is always going to be, well, if we take money away, we know what the outcome is going to be, which kids are going to flounder. And it seems
they're
that
already floundering.
They're already floundering. So it becomes a self-licking ice cream cone, Ken, where, we need more money because technology is changing and, the needs of the kids are changing. So we have to give more money. And by virtue of the fact that these children are underperforming, this is proof positive that we just have to spend a little bit more money. And so the cycle goes on.
But the data shows the opposite.
I would say that if you take away the money, it creates competition. And competition breeds success.
That's right.
And the people who will really benefit from that will be our kids. These are the future leaders of our country.
There would also still be some state money. Would there be billions of dollars? No. But the lottery is constitutionally required to go to the Education Trust Fund, which is then going out to the towns.
That's a good point. And that's constitutional because the people voted and approved that.
Now, what is, because that topic has come up before, what is the amount annually that is generated by lottery sales that gets contributed to education?
I believe it's around $350 million. Okay. Now, and the amount has been increasing dramatically in the last few years because we legalized Keno, we legalized casino gaming, and now we've legalized slot machines. And all that lottery money is going right to the Education Trust Fund. And so you ask me how much, and the answer is it's a moving target, but it's headed in the up direction.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lesson could be learned, too, from the charter schools, from the classical academies, from the Christian academies that are doing a phenomenal job of educating kids on less than $10,000 per year.
Right.
What I'd like to do is I want to take that speech that you gave. I want to break this down into different segments. So we had the production team do this. So I want to play cut one, which is addressing specifically the costs. If you could roll cut number one, please.
Reasons to oppose this bill. I could tell you that the Department of Education testified the bill would cost $538 million a year to start, plus increases every other year for adjustment. But the bill is completely silent on where that money comes from. It falls from the sky. Is it an income tax? Is it a sales tax? Is it a bigger property tax? Is there money trees that have sprouted on the State House lawn? This is $500 million that we do not have. It might as well be $500 billion.
So where does that money come from? What have you heard? I mean, we all saw the Andrew Volinsky tax sales caravan across the state going back to 2018, I think it was, where, we have to increase the adequacy rate that the state is paying, and this is going to necessitate just a tiny little bit. Because remember, it always starts off ostensibly benevolent, right? Just 0.5%. Nobody's going to feel it. Where does it come from?
It was said during this debate that it would require increase to $3 per thousand on the statewide property tax. Come up with that money if we went that route, the statewide property tax. I mean, $3 per thousand extra on top.
That's significant.
It's a huge jump. Look, Senator Altschiller was the one who sponsored the bill out from the Seacoast. And very nice lady, nothing to say about her negative, about her personality, but we just obviously disagree about the role of government. And she essentially said, we'll figure it out. If you pass the bill, we'll send it to finance. They'll figure it out. They'll find the money somewhere.
Where have we heard that before?
We
have to pass the bill to find out what's in it.
That's right. That's what I was going to say.
Don't worry about where it comes from. We'll figure it out. Now, I'll tell you that that's what I was talking about. She knew that bill was going to fail. We have 16 Republicans in that body. We're not going to vote to raise taxes by $500 million. She said she put the bill in to try to get special interest groups, teachers' unions. Believe it or not, there is a superintendents association in New Hampshire.
Right.
She
NHSAA.
wanted those groups to throw money into Democratic campaigns in this election year, and that's what it was for.
Now, what concerns me is that if the ratio were opposite, if we had a Democrat in the corner office, if we had, and I never, ever, ever, ever underestimate the Republican Party to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. It's only a matter of time before we see this happening. And I seem to recall a similar argument that was made several years ago in the state of Vermont, where the enrollment numbers were plummeting. And so now it's we got to spend more money, we got to spend more money, we got to spend more money, upwards of $40,000 per kid. And it's like, at what point, and to your point, Tom, $3 per thousand. It's always, it's so small, you're not going to feel it. But how do you eat an elephant?
That's going to bankrupt companies. People don't understand that business owners are paying these taxes as well. So they might have a higher assessed valued property, a commercial property that they're renting, leasing, whatever have you. They're not going to be able to afford that. Either that, or they're going to have to pass that money on to their tenants. Those tenants aren't going to be able to afford it. They're going to move out. Then you're going to have vacancies. People are just going to be disappearing from the state because why? It's no longer a competitive state to do business in. We're going to go back to Massachusetts. I mean, that's the reality of what's going on with the amount of money that we're talking about. I mean, from my perspective, conservatives, I would think everybody would be voting conservative because they're going to be losing their house. People are complaining now. Can you imagine if they can't afford the tax rate now, what's going to happen when the next tax rate adjustment is going to be coming out? And then to add stuff like this SB 582 amount of money on top of it. And then there was another one right after that. Keith, correct me if I'm wrong. It was education, special education, going from $2,000 to $16,000.
This was also a direct response to the Conval decision, and the idea was that we take special education funding from the state from $2,100 per kid per year to $16,000 per kid per year, and that was another $450 million.
Where do you get the money? How do you put groceries on the table? People right now, Keith, are making decisions. I just talked to a gentleman right here in Windham. He's losing his house. He cannot afford. He's trying to make all kinds of arrangements with the town to stay in his home. Unfortunately, they're going to go through that whole lien process. And that's really upsetting and disturbing. A person who's worked their entire life, wants to retire, wants to live out the rest of his days here, and unfortunately, they're going to wind up short selling his home. He's going to lose his home because he cannot afford the education portion of the bill. And I have to add this. When you look at where we were just 10, 15 years ago and where we are now, we have kids in the system that are performing lower, significantly lower. 50% of the children can't read and write and do math at grade level. But yet we're being asked to pay more than we ever have. That is a failing system.
Right. If you go to the SaveOurSchoolsNH.org website on the home page, it shows the graph. It shows spending going up. It shows adjusted for inflation.
We adjusted for inflation just because.
And it shows the scores going down.
Exactly.
So the question here becomes, what is the disconnect between these people who can't afford these tax increases, who are losing their home, which, by the way, I think is absolutely disgusting, and that's proof positive. You never own your land.
Right.
You're just one tax payment away from losing what you think you own,
Right.
which I think is disgusting. But that aside, where is the disconnect? Because, you still have people that are voting for Democrats. They know exactly what Democrats stand for. They know Democrats are tax and spend. They know that Democrats look at the average voter as basically a useful idiot and an ATM machine.
Yeah, cash cow.
So at what point do people start to understand my vote has a consequence?
Well,
and if I want fiscal responsibility, if I want economic conservatism, then I have to vote for that. And I have to hold my elected representatives, their feet has to be held to that fire. If they're not doing their job and they're not doing what they campaigned on, then they have to be replaced.
There is a narrative, and if you listen closely, you can hear it. There's a narrative that goes out ahead of an election, and this is an election year. And it basically, the narrative in this case is coming out from the school boards, is we need more state money. The reason your property taxes are high is because the state doesn't give us enough money. And not only do they not give us enough money, they're not giving us the Constitution says they have to give us. They have to. There's a group out there, the New Hampshire Fair Funding.
Yep.
It's a group of leftists, and they travel the state meeting with school boards. They've done it for years, the last 3 or 4 years. And they basically say, it's not your fault, school boards. The state needs to give you more money. They're not meeting their obligation. And I've been to school board meetings, and they say it over and over again. Don't blame us. Don't blame us for your high property taxes. Blame the state. And
so is this the result of and I've said this many times before. You've heard on my media before that the general public is politically, civically, and economically illiterate. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, you know what, your property taxes are too high because the state's not doing its job, the next logical question would be, well, I'm sorry, where does the state generate money to give to education? Are they in a private enterprise? Do they have bake sales? Are they doing car washes on Saturday? No, they derive their income through taxation. Whether it's taxation on capital gains, taxation on property, taxation on motor vehicles, taxation on taxes. It comes in through revenue in the form of a tax. Why is this so hard for people to understand, comprehend, and see through this ridiculous narrative?
This should be a public service announcement for all the civically illiterate out there. Make it really, really, really clear. You are going to lose your home if you vote Democrat.
Well, this is also a good point to give
Cure that voter
kudos
apathy
for pointing
problem
out that you've got legislators who are asking for money and they're not even aware of where it's going to come from. Just pass the bill and we'll figure it out.
No fiscal responsibility whatsoever.
No.
None.
And what that leads to is you got more people losing their homes.
And this is, Keith, I can't stress this enough. This is why people have to get educated, get informed, and show up and vote. Because everyone's belly aching after the fact. When in December comes and they get their tax bill, oh, gee, we're not going to have Christmas. We're not going to be able to afford gifts under the tree. Yeah, because you didn't pay attention to the $25 million addition they wanted to do, or the track that they wanted to build, or this next want and that next want. They're never needs. They're always wants. They're always the shiny object that they're chasing. But not only do they chase those shiny objects, but there's no fiscal accountability when they're building them in the first place.
And I love town meetings, but this is one of the drawbacks to the town meeting system. Economists call this diverse cost and concentrated benefits, right? You have certain people that are going to benefit more than it costs other people to go to the meeting. And so at every meeting, who shows up? The teachers, the firemen, the police, the EMTs, the admins.
Right.
Those are the ones who show up. And they're never going to vote for lower taxes.
Yep.
It's more spending every time. But what's it cost me to stay home in one night in March? I might miss the football game or whatever, right? That's what it costs. I might miss my TV show. They're not going to – it's better to stay on the couch, eat my dinner, and I'll worry about that later. The bill's 9 months away.
Right.
Yeah, and people don't realize how quickly, especially in terms of political cycles and election cycles, how quickly 9 months.
Do you know
goes
how
by.
many people don't know what a deliberative session is in the town? I could go ask probably 100 people. You're probably lucky if you get 2 of them that even heard the word. To your point.
Yeah.
And this is where it's the participation piece. And then people are civically illiterate, so they don't understand the process. And so they're not showing up, so they're letting this small group, this very finite group of people, make all the decisions on their behalf. But unfortunately for them, it means emptying out their bank account.
Yeah.
2 years ago, one of my towns in my district had a petitioned warrant article for a tax cap, 3% tax cap per year. But it gets deliberative session, and they can amend it. And they did, to 33%. Just gutted it.
Yeah.
But who was at that meeting? It wasn't the local property tax owners, for the
No.
most part. Right. So.
We showed up just last year. We were trying to get a budget committee in Wyndham. We're one of the very few towns that don't have a budget committee. And there's all kinds of good reasons why to have it, even at the school level. We did an internal control review, Ken. Over 130 serious risks and deficiencies within that. Now, most towns
They were so significant and frightening that the following school year, our business administrator had left and our superintendent was gone.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
in a school district that was amongst the top 5 in the state. Let that sink in.
but that represented millions of dollars worth of inefficiencies throughout the district. Some of them, my opinion, borderline unlawful, and maybe the Attorney General's office should have been involved.
Yeah, what impressed me about your speech is that you not only touched upon, where's the money going to come from, but there were so many other points that you made that Keith wants to go through, and I think you need to be applauded for that again, because you went into that discussion on the bill very well prepared.
Thank you very much.
What I want to do is I want to skip over to clip 3, where Senator Murphy is talking about local control. If we can play clip 3, please.
Of local schools would mean less local control. The state can't be on the hook for decisions made at the local level, and school boards should be careful what they wish for, because those that fund the schools will run the schools.
You want to expand on that?
Well, what I was saying earlier is that we've had a lot of correspondence, a lot of contact with the school boards, and they basically say, no, you've got to give us more money. We need more money. Well, money comes with handcuffs, and you keep demanding more money, there's going to be more mandates, whether it's federal or state. I would prefer decisions be made locally. I think that school boards should hire their own principals, and principals should hire their own staffs, and curriculum decisions should be made at the local level. And really, the state should interfere with education as little as possible. But if you go to the state and demand no, you send us another half $500 million, that money's going to come with strings. And at some point, it's like, why even have school boards? If Concord's going to run everything, why do you even need these guys elected at the local level?
And that's exactly the way the framers intended our Constitution to work in the first place. Part 1, Article 6. It was, and there's an empowering clause within that original version that empowered the legislature to authorize the towns, the parishes, the bodies corporate, and the religious societies to make adequate provision at their own expense.
Right.
And that's how towns did it, through the warrant article system.
Voluntarily.
Up until 1968, when all that language was gutted and all that local control was taken away. Towns no longer constitutionally are authorized to raise the money in the first place anymore.
And neither is the state, except for the lotteries that you brought up.
Outside of Part 2, Article 6B, which is the lottery.
And that's only since 93?
1990.
Yeah, 1990.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Prior to that, after 68.
184 years, that's the way we operated.
Yeah, and that's the point we're trying to make. We're trying to get control over the spending in our schools.
Yeah.
And the way that we believe that we should be able to do that is to say that the current mechanism for raising funds for education is unlawful. It's repugnant to the Constitution. How is it that you put before the show, Keith?
I think it was Shuttlesworth versus Birmingham, if I'm quoting that one correctly, which is laws that are repugnant to the Constitution are void and invalid.
Void ab initio.
And that's our position.
So when we talk about revenue sources for the state, because it's not entirely that it's taxation, there are obviously revenue generators. You have the lottery,
Liquor Commission.
you have the state liquor commission, things like that. As far as the lottery goes, now you had mentioned legalizing Keno, but you also have privately owned casinos here in the state. What type of revenue is the state generating from these private casinos? Nash Casino, there's one up in Lebanon. What type of revenue are they doing? And if the state were to say, hey, listen, you know what, gambling, whether it's a casino, whether it's Keno, whether it's any other aspect of it, is going to be run by the state, there could be some advantages to that. Would that be something that would be worth looking into, as opposed to taxes on individual citizens?
Well, gambling's a very complicated issue. And I'll be frank with you, there's 15 licensed casinos. Either they've opened or they're licensed to open. Right? And what the state has done for those 15 operators is essentially granted them a monopoly. All right. The state has granted those 15 operators protection. They will not have any competition. There's a moratorium on new licenses. So you can't go out and get a license to have a slot machine. Sorry, that belongs to Churchill Downs. Only they get to have slot machines. I've got a problem with that because I take seriously the admonition that people have a free and fair right to competition. That's in the Constitution. How about we follow that? But to answer your question about the state operating it, I would oppose that. I don't think the state should be operating casinos.
What if I want to have a small package store where I'm selling, high-end whiskeys and high-end bourbons and things like that? I can't do that because the state has a monopoly on that.
That's right. And honestly, I agree with you on that. The truth is that the state doesn't make money operating a chain of liquor stores anyway. The state makes money at the bailment level, operating a warehouse, which then sells the product to restaurants, casinos, hotels, and the liquor stores. They could close or privatize that liquor chain of liquor stores and really wouldn't lose much money. The money's made at the warehouse level.
Keith, you might find this interesting. We're talking about Part 2, Article 83 in the encouragement of literature, but that's also where the monopoly clause lies.
Yeah.
So in 1903, we add the Anti-Sherman Trust Act. But, you start bringing up all these examples of monopolies. What's public education?
Right now, it's a monopoly.
It's a monopoly.
And it should not be.
I agree.
I want to play clip 4, if we can roll into that, please.
I could point out the legislature has sent more money to schools every single year, even though enrollment is down 18% in the last 20 years. In fact, the state is spending more money now than ever to educate fewer students than schools have had in 3 generations. I could tell you that while the state is spending more money to educate fewer kids, the administration cost has grown to the point that New Hampshire now spends more money per pupil in admin cost than 48 other states. We spend $2,000 per student per year to push the paper. And all of those are perfectly valid and accurate reasons to oppose the bill.
So let me ask you this. If I have a private business and I'm spending more to produce less, I'm going to haul my vice president of production or my production manager into the office and say, hey, what's going on? The numbers don't add up. Who can the state address this doesn't add up issue with here?
That is the tension that we are dealing with as a legislature right now. Open enrollment, that's a big issue right now. And some people on the right are in favor. I personally am a big fan of open enrollment because I want competition. Some people haven't really seen that as a good thing. I will tell you that the education system in this state is dramatically opposed to open enrollment because they're afraid of that competition. They don't want the gravy train to end. They don't mind if the school built for 1,000 kids only has 500 kids, because the checks are going to keep coming. It doesn't matter if the results are bad or they're good. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. The checks are going to show up every year.
Well,
I was just watching Ghostbusters 2 nights ago, and I love the scene where they're standing outside the school, and one of the characters says to the other characters, you don't know what it's like out there. I've worked in the private sector. They expect results. And it's amazing how they can they being the public school systems and the educators and the administrations of these schools, can somehow divorce themselves of a fundamental concept of free market economics, which is competition is better than any form of government-imposed restrictions because it weeds out your bad performers and it rewards those who do well.
Economics is a foreign language to people in the public service.
100%.
That's
100%.
That's the problem. Look, Claremont a year ago had 3 elementary schools. Oh, wait, we've got an $8 million budget hole. Oops, now they have 1. Right? Mm-hmm. Because they finally, when the backs are to the wall, they finally realized they had no choice but to close schools, transfer kids, and make the numbers work.
Yeah. I want to bring up an important point to that piece of that topic too is, and Ken, you know this. So one of the things that clearly is happening is the enrollment is declining. Birth rates are birth rates. You know, you're not going to go back in time and create more kids. If you can, I'd like to see that. But those enrollment numbers are what they are. They're down. What unions are doing now, and this is kind of interesting to watch, and they've done this in our town when we were school board members.
They tried when we were school board members.
Good point, Ken. They tried. They're trying to lower the standards. So if you have 30 kids in a classroom, they're saying no, 15. I'm making obviously the reason
it used to be like 22, 23. Right. Now they want it to be like 15, 16, 18.
And the whole reason why is
they don't want to lose teachers.
They don't want a RIF. They don't want a reduction in force. So the unions play a role and to a detriment as well because there is.
And the school boards are playing along.
100%. 100%. Yep. So anybody listening to the show, pay attention to your teachers' contracts and that little trick.
Keith, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Open enrollment.
Other Keith.
Senator. Sorry, Senator. You deserve the title. You've earned it.
Now you can call me Keith, please.
Please, for the benefit of our audience, can you define what the parameters are for open enrollment? And by that, does a parent have the right to go to a different public school? Can they go to private schools? Can they go to charter schools? What are the benefits? What are the restrictions? What are the guidelines?
Under legislation that was passed by the Senate this year, parents would have the right to take their child out of the town that they're living in, out of those schools, and go to any other district that has capacity.
Right. Now that's a public school.
Any public school. Or charter school, of course.
Right, which are public schools.
And as long as that school has capacity. Now, the town that's receiving, there would be a sending school and a receiving school. The receiving town, a receiving school, would have the ability through the school board to set a capacity number. So if a school is designed for, I'm going to stick with a nice even number, 1,000 kids, they always know where we're going to lose some every year, and we're going to get some new kids coming in every year, and they sort of project enrollment. But they can say, well, we think we're going to have 100 seats. We'll make 50 of them available for open enrollment, and they can take 50 transfers. And what would happen if we did this is that you would see parents take their kids from schools that are not performing well, and they will go to nearby schools where there is capacity, where the kids are going to have a better fit. The results are going to be better. Maybe that school has a better theater program or a better school orchestra, and that's really the interest of that student. It allows the parents to better tailor the education of their child to each facility.
Yeah. Now, I would argue that one step further would be to give the parents the ability to place their child in any school, private or public. And if they chose a private school, taxpayers would actually save money because, as we discussed earlier, private schools do it for about half the price, and they're going to get the education that their parents are choosing for them.
I would love to have that system, but that's not what the current bill does.
No, I understand. I'm just planting a seed and a suggestion for you.
The EFA program, I think, is also a step in that direction. I think we're getting there,
right?
But we got to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yep.
I'm curious one thing, Senator, and that is...
Thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
How many kids are the public schools losing to homeschooling? Do we know I mean,
I'm
I
sure that
didn't have a
number-
chance to reach out to Anne Marie Banfield, but I think it would be a very interesting thing. How many parents are now, because of this, are now choosing to homeschool?
I know the numbers in the thousands. I mean, the EFA numbers right now are over 10,000. And I believe there's another 800 kids on a waiting list. Now, some number of those are private school kids now, and some number of homeschools. I think I heard the number 2,000, Keith, but I don't want to speak and not be certain.
Okay.
But the interest in homeschooling has been increasing dramatically in the last 15, 20 years, as I think parents have begun to figure things out for themselves. And COVID, I didn't like COVID. I didn't like how the state handled COVID. I think COVID was really not handled well. There was one silver lining, and that is that a lot of parents figured out, hey, I can teach my kids at home and get a pretty good result.
Yep, absolutely.
It opened the eyes to a lot of parents.
They also realized the type of education that children were getting.
Or they weren't getting.
Or weren't getting. Yeah, good point.
I'd like to roll clip 5, if we could.
The same oath sworn by our state's judges. Our oath is no less serious and no less valid than theirs. We each have the right and obligation to examine our conscience, reconcile it with this document, and vote accordingly. This obligation is just as sacred as those undertaken by those who sit on the bench. And I have read the various opinions of the judiciary. I have examined my conscience, and I have found, in my opinion, those documents are grossly incorrect, lacking in fact and reason. They ignore the plain meaning of the text in this document, and they are void of any understanding of history. Cherish.
Actually, let's finish that thought there with Cherish. Clip 6 picks up where that
Does not
drops
mean
off.
fund. It has never meant fund. It's a ridiculous argument that only a lawyer would think to make and only other lawyers would choose to believe. It was not written for attorneys. This was written for craftsmen and farmers. It is a straightforward document written in plain English. It says what it means, and it means what it says. Only a collective exercise in wishful thinking could anyone pretend that Article 83 requires the state to fund education. Madam President, if Cherish meant fund in 1784, when the article was adopted, why didn't the state begin sending schools checks the next year? 1785, 1786, 1787. After all, the people who voted to adopt that language, they lived in towns, they had schools. Why weren't they screaming for their annual education state funding? Why did it take 2 centuries for anyone to make that argument? Are we really to believe that for 200 years there was this massive constitutional oversight and just now we've realized it and it's our job to fix it?
You know, it's maybe not applicable in this sense, but you've heard, of course, those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it. Those who don't understand history and who don't understand how to read and understand terminology and context are doomed to make mistakes. And this, I think, is really a perfect example of custom and usage. We're just developing customs, and rather than looking at the legality and the constitutionality of what we're doing, we're saying, well, this is a custom, and we just have to evolve. That we just have to, we have to make progress. And it always sounds good. It always sounds benevolent, but it always comes with a price tag.
Right, and custom and usage, according to our founding fathers, is at the time that the people approved our Constitution. It's not what we've evolved in society. If you want to change the custom and usage, you have to change the Constitution. So as you pointed out, you go all the way back to the beginning. What was it then? Why weren't people demanding those checks? Because the Constitution didn't demand it, didn't allow it. And I'm curious, your speech was so eloquent. What kind of feedback did you get?
I got very positive feedback. I mean, I personally probably got 50 or 60 messages on Facebook or on Messenger and text messages from people who said that they watched the speech and they enjoyed it. And they appreciated hearing those sentiments. It all comes down to how you view the Constitution. And I mean that both the federal Constitution and the state Constitution. I personally view it as an anchor that keeps us stable. It provides stability, reliability for people. It protects their rights. It gives them It gives us the system of government that it has that has allowed us to be one of the most prosperous and free people to live in history.
Yeah.
And it's very dangerous to take the other view that's taken by the left. It's just a piece of paper.
It's not a living, breathing document.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Ken, and this, I have a question at the end of this for you. We just had a conversation. But by the way, just for the record, that part that we just watched is probably the most favorite of my clip, because it just goes right to the heart of everything that I believe too. Being an originalist, being a textualist, you need a textual grant of authority. That is what the people want. It's the people. It's not the representatives. It's the people. That it's what they decide. And this is why we have a constitutional amendment process. It's not a, put it on a ballot. It's put it on a ballot question and ask the people to redefine the framework, which is the Constitution in and of itself. And we did that. We did that in 1850. And we asked a specific question in 1850's Constitutional Convention: do you want to have mandatory public taxation for education?
And the people said
no.
Now, what did former Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court have to say about that?
Funny you asked that question. I just had a conversation this morning with former Chief Justice Bob Lynn, and he too believes that the word cherish was that was a bridge too far. And I've heard many people that I've spoken to refer to it as a usurpation. We have Paul and Bretson, usurpation. Rick Lehman thinks it's a usurpation. Former Senator Bob Guider believes it's a usurpation. I've heard from Ed Mosca, Dan McGuire, people that understand and have a really comprehensive understanding of Article 83 knew that word cherish was hortatory.
And he also said it was a very compelling argument.
It was a very compelling argument. This is what he told me with the 1850.
And he said, you did your homework.
Well, there's a lot of homework, and I don't want to take all that credit because that was Dan Richard that put me onto that. And I got a lot of help from Ashley Miller. Shout out to Ashley Miller, the state archivist, because she's been great. And so is Dave Scanlon, by the way. So, where would I be without the stories of Bill Gardner?
And that response that we got from former Chief Justice Bob Lynn, I'm as appreciative of that as I am of the statements that you made on the Senate floor.
Yeah. Yep.
It shows you did your homework. It shows you understand why you're there.
Yeah. Thank you.
We can roll clip 7, please.
Even more absurd, the actual language of Article 83 is that we are to cherish the interest of literature and the sciences in seminaries and public schools. If that obligates us to fully fund public schools, it obligates us to fund seminaries. When should we tell the Fairwood Bible Institute to expect their check?
Awesome.
Why aren't we funding a league of authors and geologists, since we are equally obligated to cherish literature and the sciences? Again, the whole argument is ridiculous. It is a waste of this body's time to even ponder it. Article 83 was copied from the Massachusetts Constitution, written by John Adams, specifically placed not in the section of the Constitution that recognizes the rights of citizens, but rather in the section that describes the form of government. The purpose of the clause is to protect our participatory democracy as John Adams intended. Nothing in it obligates the state to pay anything. The plain truth is that the members of the High Court forgot their place in Claremont and in every related decision since. They legislated from the bench. They did our job, falling into the trap that has snared well-meaning judges from the beginning of the Republic. But it is we who are the elected representatives of the people. It is our role to decide the law. It is their role to enforce it. If judges wish...
So I have to ask, Senator, because this is not your speech that you gave, I don't believe is representative of the general body of knowledge that the average elected representative in this state has. You did research into this. You looked into this. What was the epiphany for you? Because, I mean, this is well-researched, and your statement, your speech was well-researched.
Thank you. Well, many, many years ago, I was a naive Democrat living in Maryland. And I had a college class on constitutional law that was at a public university, given by a professor that somehow sneaked into the job. And he was a textualist. He really introduced me to Scalia and to
One of my favorites.
the great contest throughout history between people who would rewrite the Constitution by legislating from the bench and those who actually feel an obligation to adhere to it. And it was just a mind-melting moment for me. And I have taken every decision since that I have made as a legislator and as a person who was voting in a booth, and asked myself that question: is this compatible with the Constitution? And if you view it that way, and not just the way that I personally wish that it said this, but is this what the people who actually ratified the document meant? Wow. And if you look at it that way, through that lens, things get a lot clearer. And I wish that more people did that.
I wish they did that too. And for me, the part where you recognized the bipartite Constitution, where we have the Bill of Rights and we have the form of government, I thought that was wonderful.
Thank you. The truth is that the people who wrote our constitutions, they were brilliant people. And they looked throughout history at other republics and other democracies and looked at why those fell and how they fell. And they recognized that liberty requires vigilance. Mm-hmm. It requires the public to be informed and be involved. And that's why Article 83 says what it does. John Adams was very clear that by cherishing those things, you're really cherishing the public being educated and involved in their state government.
And for the listeners, I just want to add something. Our framers knew this. And in fact, in the 1850 convention under Franklin Pierce, he was the president. They they proposed an amendment to create Article 40 in Part 1, where they grab Article 83 and bring it into the Bill of Rights. And I found that very interesting that they did that because they knew that in Part 2 it was subordinate to the rights. Therefore, in order to have mandatory funding for public education, they deemed it as a right. And that was rejected by the people because they didn't want centralized government education.
But this also ties back to what we talked about earlier about people not going to town meetings, not going to deliberative sessions.
Yes.
Right? And losing some property rights in the process. They're losing that involvement in their government.
Yeah.
Really, people need to be involved at every level. And that's what he was saying 225 years ago.
Yep.
And here we are now.
I know this is regarding a Senate bill, but I haven't heard a lot out of people like Sweeney and Osborne and Packard and from the House. What are you hearing there? And are they recognizing this and their need to ensure that this doesn't become an issue, at least as it pertains to the New Hampshire House?
There was other bills filed in the New Hampshire House that spent the same money, that had the same goal in mind. I do not believe those have yet been voted upon by the House. I have heard from Majority Leader Osborne. He appreciated my speech. He was one of the people who messaged me and said that he watched it and enjoyed it. I don't think they're going to be passing the House. If they do, we'll deal with it in the Senate the same way.
Okay. I want to play the final clip here, please.
To enforce it. If judges wish to influence education funding and policy, they just have to step down from the bench, put their name on a ballot, and win the right to sit in these chairs. The courts are demanding that we increase spending by $500 million. But in order to spend more is in order to tax more. And Article 5 specifically reserves all decisions related to taxation to the legislature. No court can order us to raise taxes. We, the legislature, do not dance to their tune, and it is dangerous to this institution for any of us to believe that we should. Our votes are our own. The courts are attacking our very right to vote as our conscience demands. Madam President, I urge the members of this body to uphold their oaths to this document, protect the independence of the legislature, and respond to the meanderings with vehement indignation rather than acquiescent supplication. Thank you, Madam President.
You know, we mentioned earlier tradition, custom, and usage. And I think, unfortunately, in this country, both on a state level and on a national level, you're seeing a tradition, custom, and usage of from the bench legislation becoming more and more and more customary and more acceptable. And I think that's reprehensible to our Constitution. And I think the way that you put it is perfect. If these judges want to legislate, they can step down off the bench, put their name on a ballot, and get elected to fill those seats. At what point does the House and the Senate rebel against this and say to the judiciary, this is your place, stay in your lane?
Part 1, Article 37. I was cheering at the top of my lungs during this part. I was like, yes.
Right, but we have that. But here's the question.
Yeah.
At what point does the House and the Senate start to hold them accountable to this and say, no, this is our purview? To be honest with you, I would kind of expect that the state representatives and the state senators in the state of New Hampshire would say, hey, listen, you know what? No, you're doing our job for us. Be a little bit territorial about what is your responsibility and say to the judiciary, no. Your job is to interpret these, especially with the Supreme Court. Your job is to interpret the laws as it relates to the state constitution, not to legislate from the bench and choose what you like and what you don't like and subjectively make changes through legal precedent.
So we really have two choices to do that. One is what we've been doing so far, which is ignoring them. Thanks for your opinion. We don't like your carpet either. You care about our opinion as much as we should care about yours. The other option would be an impeachment. And I think that was tried before.
With Brock.
Yep, Justice Brock. And I'm not necessarily advocating for that right now, but that would be the sort of the doomsday nuclear scenario, would be to impeach someone for doing that. Now, I think we've taken the long view, and by we, I mean the legislature and the executive branch for the last 10 years, have taken the long view. We're just going to wait for these folks to retire, and we're going to hopefully appoint new people to the bench that actually read the document and apply it correctly. We've had some turnover in the last few years, and I'm hopeful that Conval Part 2 may have a different outcome.
So when you bring up Conval Part 2, I found it interesting when reading. So Massachusetts, it has McDuffie. As McDuffie's case is coming up at the same time as Claremont's coming up, they both find a duty to, quote, cherish. But it was interesting that, believe it or not, Massachusetts, you would think it would have been the reverse, that New Hampshire would have done what Mass did and Mass did what New Hampshire did. But it was surprisingly that Massachusetts said, okay, yep, there's a duty to cherish, and legislature, go do some cherishing. Where New Hampshire did the opposite and said, okay, we're going to do some adequate education, then we're going to get into funding mechanisms, and then we're going to get into the weeds on these funding mechanisms. And they started doing all these legislative functions all throughout Claremont 1, Claremont 2, Londonderry, Conval, the entire progeny, and they're still doing it with Rand today. What does the legislature think about all these usurpations by the judiciary and violating the separation of powers under Part 1, Article 37?
I think the answer to that question depends on who's in charge. The Democrats have had the legislature here and there throughout the last 15, 20 years. They've had the House, they've had the Senate, they've had the governorship. Luckily, they haven't really had all three at the same time for the most part. The only one I can think of was that 2 years during one of Lynch's terms, they had everything. And thank God they didn't push this through then, because it would have passed, right? As it was, I believe after those 2 years, it was 2008, 2010, I was part of the class of 2010 that came in on the red wave that year.
Supermajority.
We had a $950 million deficit after just 2 years of Democratic unilateral control at Concord. What would happen if they had 4 or 6 years? This would pass.
And you guys erased that.
Yeah.
Without raising taxes.
11% reduction in spending.
And you had money in the bank for the rainy day fund at the end. I think you had like $800 million left over. What an achievement.
That's what happens when you have solid Republican principled control.
Solid Republican control. Solid.
So this is a massive election coming up at the end of this year. There's a lot riding on it. Because if we were to lose majorities in Concord, in the House and the Senate, and if, Governor Ayotte, I don't always agree with everything she says, but I think she's so far better than any other option we're going to get right now. If we did not retain control in Concord, this is a different state. This is going to become East Vermont.
Yeah.
It really is that close.
I think by and large, the sentiment is that AOT is safe, that the Senate, it's going to remain in Republican control. The House, what's your finger on the pulse?
You asking me to guess?
Sure.
230 Democrats, 170 Republicans.
Really? Wow.
Wow.
And while I certainly hope Governor Ayotte is safe, remember that Governor Benson also had a similar lead in polling this time in his only term.
One-term governor.
Right. So it's too early to make any projections, and I don't think anybody is safe in Concord.
I want to encourage people to check out the Government Integrity Project, and I also want people to check out the SaveOurSchoolsNH.org website. Dig around on that website because you're going to find some very, very interesting information. You're going to find the historical references, you're going to find the constitutional references, and you're going to find a way that you may just save about 75% on your taxes, and you're going to do it legally. And I think it's about time. This is how you send a message. You cut off the funding. And you say, if you want more money, first of all, just like with any child who's going haywire with mom and dad's credit card, you take it away, you cut off the ability to spend money, and you say, when you can prove to me that you're responsible and mature enough to handle this responsibility, this trust chance, for lack of a better term, then perhaps you'll get a privilege. This is the time right now to do that. And it starts by visiting SaveOurSchoolsNH.org. Senator, I want to give you about 30 seconds here for final thoughts, and then we want to wrap this up.
Well, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you having me on, and really thanks for all the very kind things said about the speech. You know, it's not often that I stand up and speak in Concord because, frankly, most of us know what we're going to do on any given bill. And we're paid $100 a year to be there. This is nobody's full-time job. And we're all there, both Democrats and Republicans. We're there to advance what we believe individually is the right thing for the state. You know, we're there to make the difference that we can, and luckily we have a solid Republican majority in the Senate, and looking forward to keeping that going.
All right, Senator, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Ken, final thoughts?
I think you summed it up really well. I think people need to go to SaveOurSchoolsNH.org and learn more about how they can save on their taxes, on their property taxes legally, and take advantage of the opportunities. This organization is there to help. So if you fill out the forms and you file them for your tax abatements and your tax refunds, you don't have to do it alone. The organization will be there to help you.
Thank you. Tom?
And I just want to, again, I appreciate you coming and joining us. I want to make sure that when we see our elected officials, that's really what the Government Integrity Project is about, is holding people accountable. But when we see public officials like yourself doing the people's work and doing it in such a way that it's remarkable, I thought the speech was just wonderful. I can't say enough about the speech, but I can't say enough about what's behind all that speech. It's the informed knowledge, understanding of the Constitution, of people's rights. And that was impressive of how you upheld all that and that you stood up there on the Senate floor. And I think that this is a speech that's going to go down for a while as something, at least in my mind, is just very impressionable for people to kind of put their arms around it. And again, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's going to do it for this special edition of Granite State Live. I'd like to thank my guest this evening, Tom Murray, again, co-founder of the Government Integrity Project, co-founder of the Windham Academy Charter School, and former Windham School Board Vice Chair, Ken Eyring, co-founder of Government Integrity Project, co-founder of the Windham Academy Charter School, and former Windham School Board Chairman. And, of course, our super special guest this evening, New Hampshire State Senator Keith Murphy. Any more information on either SaveOurSchoolsNH.org or this initiative, please email us, granitestatelive@gmail.com. That's granitestatelive@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, be well, God bless, and remember, be nice. Civility does work. Have a great evening, everybody.
We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.